Hey, what's up, everybody? Isaac here. I got my brother Mark Okeson on with me, and we are diving into the very exciting topic of ethics.
Yeah, it is exciting, isn't it?
Yes, it is. I remember taking the exams, and ethics is always the subject that you're kind of like, eh,
Yeah,
eh.
yeah. But it but it's important to have a fundamental understanding of this stuff as you're
Yeah.
practicing. So
This is where you could like lose it all.
that's right.
So
That's
this
right.
big stuff, especially as you've earned your PE license. You're going to be held accountable to these things. So, Mark, why don't you talk about how many different places are there for ethics? Kind of
Well,
what are we looking at?
yeah, it's interesting because there's codes of ethics for engineers in several locations. There's lots of different organizations that have compiled their canons of ethical behavior that we're all supposed to adhere to. Some of the big ones is the National Society of Professional Engineers. They have a code of ethics. Of course, American Society of Civil Engineers, they've got theirs, which I would probably say is the one that's the most cited um, around. But I mean, university engineering programs have their code of ethics that they ask all their engineers and their students, I guess, to understand as they're going through their programs. And then you can get down into all your professional licensing boards. So the actual board, the actual state that you're licensed with, has a licensing board that has their own code of ethics that they want you to understand, and those adhere to the state laws that deal with licensure and your PE license. Those there's rules that go along with that. But I think for the basis for our discussion, Isaac, I think it makes sense to just look at the American Society of Civil Engineers, ASCE's code of ethics, as kind of our backbone, our outline, because I think they cover most of the stuff that we want to talk about. But
Okay. Well,
it's
before
important
we
to
do
understand.
that,
Yeah, go ahead.
I wanted to ask maybe a few questions. So,
Okay.
I, I make light of this on the exam, I guess. That's not people's favorite sections to study for if it comes up, but obviously it is very important in the world of civil engineering with so many different areas to dive into ethics. I mean, some of these sections are very long. Um, I could you just, I mean, couldn't you really, in reality, boil this down to a few things personally, like don't try to cheat people, do the right thing, do what's right in every circumstance. Like, isn't that kind of
You
what these things
you
are?
yeah, you could say that, paint it with a broad brush and say just have integrity in your practice is what I would sum it
Yes.
up. Just have integrity with your practice. If you're being dishonest, if you're cheating somebody, like you're saying, if
Taking
you're keeping
advantage.
secrets, yeah, trying to take undue advantage of someone else, given your position of authority, then it's probably something you shouldn't be doing.
Okay. So that's a good overarching thing to remember. Maybe we could close it right now. Just kidding. Let's go ahead and dive into the code of ethics. So we guys are going to we're going to check out the ASCE's code of ethics is kind of what we're going to touch upon today, and maybe even share some personal experiences of things we've seen with ethics. So Mark, why don't you cover what we have here? We have canons, it looks like.
Yeah. So let's talk about first the fundamental principles that ASC lists, and this is kind of the summary, I would say. You're going to compare this with what Isaac and I just said should be the summary. Just have integrity. But this is what ASC says. They said engineers should uphold and advance the integrity, honor, and dignity of the engineering profession by using their knowledge and skill for the enhancement of human welfare and the environment, being honest and impartial, and serving with fidelity the public, and striving to increase the competence and prestige of the engineering profession. And finally, supporting the professional and technical societies of their disciplines. So those are the fundamental principles. And then they go into the canons, they call them, which are the major topics in engineering. So, or in ethics in engineering. So let's talk about Canon 1, shall we?
Yeah, so Canon 1 is to hold safety paramount. So it's the very first thing. And as an engineer, the safety and health of the public is extremely important. So everything we do should keep that in mind and recognize that as we are designing things and building things. When you're making judgment calls, you obviously have to keep the public and keep things safe, and that's really our number one duty. That's, I think, a huge reason why we require a PE license, is because we hold you're designing things that could put the public safety at risk, and so you're signing, you're stamping. So one of the things here, Mark, is it says that engineers are going to approve or seal only design documents reviewed or prepared by them.
Yeah, that's an important thing. It's easy. I've been in positions. I am in a position where I'm managing engineers that are below me or under my supervision, and they can produce designs that I could easily just say, yeah, I've got some competence, or excuse me, some confidence in what they've produced in the past. I'm not really going to check this with as much scrutiny as I normally would, and just stamp it and send it out. But anything that's under your supervision, you really need to make sure you've got a feel for what is actually being produced, and make sure that you've got a level of confidence in the design that's being produced before you send it out.
So that probably, I mean, that also means having your expertise in one area. You're not going to be practicing in like 4 other areas that you probably don't have experience in doing.
We'll talk about that in Canon 2, which is our next one.
Okay,
that's a good segue.
Let's go in there. I guess before we do that, one of the items under safety is that if you have reason to believe another person is in violation of that you would present that information to the proper authority. And they list a hotline number for the ASC. I've never personally done that, but I guess if you are finding somebody that is in violation of that, you can notify somebody, which would probably suck for that other person, but if
it's something that's serious enough and that is jeopardizing the safety of the public, why it's your duty to get that corrected. And so by reporting that gets things going in the right direction, gets those individuals identified for what they're doing.
Okay. So what's number 2? Canon number 2.
Canon number 2 says engineers shall perform services only in the area of their competence, which is what you brought up, Isaac.
Yeah. So, I mean, you're not going to practice in other areas. I didn't dive into water resources. I don't work for a water resources firm, so I'm not going to tell you how to, figure out 100-year rain events and things like that nature, because that's not where I focused my studies on. But it doesn't mean you probably don't understand that section or you don't understand those things, but you're going to practice where you have your expertise. Marx's constructions and structures.
Yeah, I was going to say in structures. So I get people associate me with just engineering in general sometimes, and sometimes these are people that want me to do work that's maybe outside of what I typically do for my job, my day job, and they want me to get into areas that I really don't. I wouldn't say I've got expertise in those. And like Isaac's saying, like water resources, I just don't get into those areas of engineering in my work on a regular basis. My area of emphasis is structures, and And so if they want me to design structures, then that's my area of competence and my area of expertise. That's what I stick with.
So yeah, one of the bullet points they have here is that you're not going to fix your signature or seal anything in a subject matter which you lack competence by virtue of education or experience. So, yeah, you got to watch out for that, I think. And I'm sure there's others that are out there that probably do something, either that's on the side or who knows what that is. But
the way I do this one is I just kind of do a gut check. If I feel uncomfortable with what I'm doing, it's, I'm not I don't have the experience that lets me be comfortable with what I'm designing, because I've seen my designs implemented and I know that they work because I've seen them in action. If I don't have that level of comfort, then I realize I'm outside of my area of expertise, and so I probably shouldn't be doing that.
Good point. Okay, let's jump to number 3, canon number 3, which is issue true statements. Engineers shall issue public statements only in an objective and truthful manner. What's this one about?
Well, hopefully, in my experience, in my circle of influence, I don't see a lot of engineers that have to issue public statements. I would think that this would fall under maybe those engineers that work for public entities, municipalities, state governments. There's DOTs. There's engineers that work for Department of Transportation that have to issue public statements all the time.
They're serving as expert witnesses. This happens a lot in my own workplace. In the utility world, they'll bring up expert witnesses, whether it's with substation design, transmission design, or anything else involved with engineering, especially nowadays when California's been burning and they've had to rely on probably on expert witnesses about how some of these things have started, the design of those transmission lines and such like that. So occasionally you might be asked to be an expert witness if something ends up ever going to court and providing your technical knowledge to those that are asking questions about the job.
Yeah, and what's tough is it's usually this stuff happens after something has gone wrong.
Yes.
And so they can be tough situations to be involved with. But
I'll just read like 2 more of these. Oh, keep going. Sorry.
I was just gonna say, but you got to be honest and straightforward. But you also gotta keep in mind. I mean, sometimes the media can't be very. They're not very generous, or they're not very straightforward in how they present what you talk about. I've been involved with incidents. One time on my previous employer, we had a big fire at our office, and the fire in our office ended up endangering some of the adjacent properties, and there was a local journalist that was trying to stir up a lot of trouble about that, and with the neighboring properties owners. And so I had to kind of take a hard stance and say, I don't have any comment. And sometimes that's the best way to treat those situations, because you can get into some big trouble.
Well, yeah.
Opening your mouth, and then the press doesn't treat you necessarily fairly or unbiased, and you can get in trouble with those kind of things. So yeah, you got to be careful too, and protect the interests of your employer too.
No comment. Good comment.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've sat in some stuff, and sometimes that's the best thing to say. So, I guess one other bullet point under there is that says engineers shall issue no statements, criticism, or arguments on engineering matters which are inspired or paid by interested parties, unless they indicate on whose behalf the statements are made. I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, that's a good one.
So you're not supposed to be paid for statements or criticisms unless you indicate on whose behalf the statements are made.
Yeah, and that's just so they know your background. They know your leanings and your biases, right?
Is that because maybe you work for the company that's paying your
No,
check?
you may have been hired by a company that supplies a specific product, and it may be
Uh,
some kind of an engineered product, and you're issuing a statement. Well, you need to disclose
we
who's
use them.
paying you to make that statement. So anybody listening to that statement knows where you're coming from,
Good.
knows what your leanings are and your biases are.
Okay, well, let's dive into Canon. We could probably spend a lot more time on each one of these guys, but we're trying to keep this concise for you and let you dive in to read ethics on your own. So let's dive into canon number 4, which is to act as a faithful agent, which basically says that engineers are going to act in professional matters for each employer or client as faithful agents or trustees and will avoid conflicts of interest. So, what's your thoughts on this one?
Well, when you've been hired by a client, you need to represent them and serve as a faithful agent, as it says. It's just, as you're representing a client, you're producing a design that's in their best interest, whatever that may be. You're kind of carrying the water for them. You're defending them. You're acting as if you are them. You're using your engineering judgment to produce the best design possible, and something that's of quality, and it's going to be I mean, help me out, Isaac. Here, it's just going to be a service that whoever you're working for is going to be proud of. There's so many ways when there's a project. There's so many different disciplines that can be involved in a project. I mean, you could have a big structure that's being designed, a big office building or a big industrial facility, whatever it is. There's multiple disciplines of engineering that are involved with that project. There's civil engineering, there's mechanical engineering, there's structural engineering. And there could even be, transportation engineering, all involved in the same project. And so a client will hire a group of designers to get his project designed. And all of those guys, even though they're of different disciplines, all need to work together in that client's best interest. And sometimes there's things that come up that have to be discussed and figured out so that the client's best interest is always being served.
Yeah, I mean, represent who you work for, right? And just looking at some of these bullet points, you're not going to accept compensation from other parties, and you're working on the same project. You're not going to do that. You're not going to accept gratuities or anything that's part of this, right? So, that you have weird connections with.
Yeah, and I've been involved with projects where the structure is affected by like the drainage design, for instance. And so it would be unethical for me to say, hey, I could make this easier on myself. The structure will be a little easier to design if I, get these drainage elements out of the way. Sand oil separators or whatever the storm drain alignment is, I could get that changed to benefit me. Maybe it wouldn't be in the best interest of the client, but it gets me an easier structure to design. I can get through the process quicker, and I make more money. But maybe it's not the best drainage design, which ultimately I could design around that drainage element and get a good structural design, but maybe in the long run, it wouldn't be the best thing for the client because the drainage wouldn't be adequate, So
Yep.
just an example.
And some other things is like you need to be telling your company or employer, like if something is not going to work or you see issues with something, make sure they know that. Make sure that you're not spreading confidential information where it shouldn't be. And I'm noticing in a lot of these kind of ethics questions, not only do all these other agencies or groups have codes of ethics, but also your very own employer will have codes of ethics. I have to sign something every single year about ethics. So, I mean, there's this whole subject here to act as a faithful agent, just, represent your company and their best interests. And a lot of those ethical things will take care of themselves. So,
Yep.
Okay, let's dive into canon number 5, reputation by merit. What's this guy?
This says engineers shall build their professional reputation on the merit of their services and shall not compete unfairly with others. So we're not taking political contributions or unlawful considerations, it says, to secure work, right? That would be unethical. We're not negotiating contracts for professional services unfairly. And
you're not gonna ham up your resume. You're not gonna falsify your academic or professional qualifications.
And then on the other side,
that probably happens more than you think.
Oh, it happens a lot. It does. But you're also going to give proper credit to those engineers that have come up with the good ideas or the unique solutions for different problems. You're going to give those guys their due, right? Yeah, even if they're working under your supervision. You might have a guy that's working under your supervision that, man, he comes up with a great solution and you take all the credit, without giving him any. That's not right.
This happens probably a lot. I've heard a story about the issue of falsifying your academic or professional qualifications. I think a snag that people sometimes hit is if you ever change your name. Let's say you got licensed under one name and then you put on your resume a different name. I've heard of employers that get held up or snags when people do change their name. So if you're ever going to change your name, make sure you can back that up, because employers will do a check to make sure you do have a license, and that might not come up. So make sure you're not falsifying that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's a big deal. What about advertising for your services? There's ethical ways about doing that too. You shouldn't advertise for services that you're not competent in, right? That kind of goes along with practicing in your area of competency. To get more business, you shouldn't advertise or tell everybody that you can do things that you can't do, really.
Yep. That's interesting. Right? Yeah, they dive into quite a bit about advertising, so something to check out. Better Call Saul. That's a that's a funny show. Okay. You're not gonna, engineers shall not maliciously or falsely, directly or indirectly injure the professional reputation, prospects, practice, or employment of another engineer by indiscriminately criticizing their work.
You know
Your
what?
That sucks.
Yeah, that's kind of a professional courtesy. I get into situations all the time where I'm critiquing someone else's structural design. I see so much of it that when I see in my opinion, it's I'll call it a less than optimal design. And I voice my opinion about it, and I've done it to other engineers. It's kind of a professional courtesy to say, well, they probably had their reasons to do it that way, and we need to probably try to understand that, even though it's probably not the way you did it. Yeah. And usually it has to deal with constructability. The engineer that designed whatever I'm looking at didn't have any constructability things in mind when he went about his design. And so when I have criticisms like that, usually you try to handle that kind of discreetly.
What's this last one? Engineers shall not use equipment, supplies, office facilities of their employers to carry on outside private practice without consent of your employers.
Yeah.
So don't be working on those side gigs.
Yeah. If you got a little side hustle going on and you're using your office equipment from your main employer, and they don't know about it, that's probably a problem. You should, yeah.
You might be without a job.
That's
All
right.
right, let's dive into canon number 6. Uphold professional honor. Engineers will act in such manners as to uphold and enhance the honor, integrity, and dignity of the engineer profession, and shall act with zero tolerance for bribery, fraud, or corruption.
Yeah, so
I'll pay you a little extra to not put that in your design.
yeah, let's be honest here. We shouldn't be dealing with fraudulent or dishonest business practices, and we shouldn't tolerate it from others. If we see it happening, at least call them out for it.
Yeah, and that might be harder done than really said when you're really in it.
Well, it is, because you're talking about, you're dealing with people's livelihoods, right? This is their jobs, and sometimes it's tough to act ethically when it's when it's somebody's job that's on the line, or their reputation.
Yep. And then many workplaces have their own policies regarding this too. I know in my own, like, contractors or those that I engage with outside the company, if they want to buy you even lunches or things of that nature, they can't spend a fortune on you. So there's a dollar limit to what that is, where they feel, I guess, that's probably ethical to do. But yeah, there's usually rules here that employers will enforce on you as well. So, but I mean, this is just kind of a no-brainer. If you're living a life of integrity, you shouldn't be doing those things.
Yeah, so just make sure you're transparent and you're being truthful and you know what you're doing.
Okay, let's go to canon number 7. Continue professional development. What's this one?
Okay, so it says engineers shall continue their professional development through their careers and shall provide opportunities for the professional development of those engineers under their supervision. So this has been a big one throughout my career. I've once you're licensed, the learning just doesn't stop at that point. It continues, as you know, Isaac. You're constantly trying to update your skills. Technology is constantly developing. I know engineers, I would say, are generally adverse to changes, which is why the codes change so much when there's studies and there's university research to back up the way things are designed and changes in design. It usually takes a lot of years before the code actually reflects those kind of things and gets implemented. And so we're kind of adverse to change, but even though we're licensed professionals, we need to continue to educate ourselves on the latest technology and keep on top of that stuff. And it can be tough. I don't know. It's been a tough thing to keep on top of in my career, all the innovations and changes that happen.
Well, and I think people at different time periods of their career, are engaged with this at different levels. When you're starting out your career, you should be super hungry to learn all there is, to learn new software tools, to be really proficient at what you want to dive into, to keep growing your arsenal of licensing. You're going to get your FE, you're going to get your PE license. You could even go beyond that. A lot of people that are going into project management, at least what I've seen, are pushing this PMP now. And so there's just ways to keep staying engaged with what you're doing. I think as we get more comfortable in our positions, it does get harder to want to continue. Everybody's jumped online and seen the continuing ed on-demand course, like, a few times probably, but you probably should find something that engages you.
Right. But when you're in that position, then it's kind of going outside of your traditional maybe area of practice that you've known and worked for a lot of years. You take it to the next level because there's always some I'll call them outlying subjects from your core competency that you could you can go in and explore that and learn about that enhance your abilities to do what your core competencies are. But it just gives you that extra base of knowledge that makes you a better engineer, I think.
Yeah, I think that's very wise. So keep getting educated. Okay, let's dive into the last one, which is Canon 8. Treat all persons fairly. So this one, in all manners, it says to relate to their profession, treat all persons fairly, and encourage equitable participation without regard to gender identity, race, national origin, ethnicity, everything,
religion, age, sexual orientation, disability, political affiliation. Yeah, everything. So
just treat people fairly, right? You're not going to give anybody a hard time because of any of those things.
And we all, I think it's important to recognize that we all come from a certain background, which gives us our tendencies and our bias and our, our likes and our dislikes. All that comes from the way we were raised, the way we were brought up, the way we view the world. But we really can't, use that against other people. We need to treat everybody the same. There's people that are different from you that may think differently than you. And it's hard to hold some of those things back. You want to criticize and I don't know, maybe go after somebody because of you don't agree with the way they live their life or the way they are, or whatever. But in a professional environment, you got to be above those kind of things and treat everybody fairly and everybody ethically.
Yeah, it's good that they call us out. It said that they have to call us out, but yes, canon number 8, treat all persons fairly. So no, I think that's very insightful. I think that gives everybody kind of an insight and taste of some ethical issues and the things that you need to think about as you start your professional engineering journey. I'm just going to kind of maybe cap some of this. If you do find people that are in violation, at least with these that we're reading from the ASCE, you are encouraged to call or if you have questions about anything, you're encouraged to call the ASCE Ethics Hotline, which is 1-800-548-2723, extension 6151. So these get updated, I believe, all the time. But if you have any questions about ethics related to this, you can go to the ASCE.org, go check out the ethics yourselves. You can look at questions. You can do a bunch of things here related to ethics. So anything else you want to add to this, Mark?
No, it's just good material to just have in the back of your mind. And just, I would say you want to kind of commit yourself to pursuing your practice or having or doing your practice according to these code of ethics. It's you're just going to be a nice, a good, well-rounded, ethical practicing engineer if you do this, and you'll gain a lot of respect from your colleagues and those you work with. It's just the right thing to do. So.
Okay, very good. All right, guys. Well, that's going to wrap this up. Thanks for being here, and we will see you in the next one. Thanks, Mark.
Yep. See ya.
Bye.